Alright, well, what we're going to do here is this is the new build for my computer. As you can see, it's kind of sitting in parts. This is everything that's arrived. The one thing I am going to be reusing from my other computer is going to be the main case, and then the drives that were with it. So I'm going to be using the two 500 gig Seagate mechanical drives and the 500 gigabyte Samsung 840 Evo SSD. Other than that, the DVD recorder, the all-in-one cooler, and the case fans. Everything else is going to be gutted. It's going to be being used to replace my daughter's computer, to give her a little bit of a bump up and upgrade. And this is going to be my new stuff. Alright, welcome back. Went ahead and got the old computer disassembled, pulled everything out of it, gutted it, cleaned it out, blew it out with the air compressor really good. The compressor just wasn't doing it. So got all the dust bunnies out of here, tried to wipe the case down. I did leave DVD drive in here. Pulled the power supply out. Also left the top fans in for now since they weren't in the way of anything. Also the two hard drives are down at the bottom here, those 500 gig mechanical hard drives I was telling you about. I'll probably reset those back up and rate again once I get everything reassembled. But that'll give me about 4 terabytes of storage now once I get everything together. So it should be good for a while. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and fit the new power supply in. One important thing is orientation. Make sure you get this in correctly. The side panel on this computer does have an air vent in the side for the power supply, so I want to make sure that I get that fan mounted so it can pull that fresh air in, keep it nice and cool. Again, this does have that eco mode on here that I can turn on that makes it fanless. It only turns on if it really needs to turn it on, but I'm going to leave that turned off just because I want to make sure for life of this power supply that it's going to keep it cool. I'll test it out to see what the fan difference is and see what the sound is like, but if it's not that major, I'm not going to worry about it. Go ahead and we'll get this fitted in here. As you guys can see, I've got a helper this time. I'm not trying to hold the camera myself. I found that was getting to be a little bit too difficult, especially if I'm trying to use two hands to do this. I just couldn't try to hold the phone with my mouth, so I didn't think that would work too well, you guys. Hopefully as I move on here, I can get a little bit better setup to where I have better camera equipment to record with, maybe a tripod that actually works. The one I was trying to work with was a little 6-inch tripod, and that was so low to the tabletop that it was shooting nothing but my chest, my stomach, and the bottom of the computer. That's not really what I want to show you guys. So I went ahead and I got that fitted in place here. Now, where am I go? Over here. This case comes with a little bracket that goes in underneath the bottom of that power supply. Don't mind me, I'm using my foosball table. It's the only space I have big enough to really work on this. But down here, there's a spot for this to fit down here, and what that does is it's got some notches on here that'll fit up against that power supply to hold it in place, keep it from moving. It also helps to support the weight of it, which with this one, with how beefy it is, it's definitely a good thing. It's not warping this case at all, but I think over time, because of the sheet metal, it could possibly warp that. So having this extra little bit on here definitely helps, and I mean, it's a sign of a good quality case to have that. I also like the fact that it's located at the bottom here, so it's kind of out of the way, which is nice. My only complaint with this setup, though, I don't like the fact that they have these hot swap serial ATA connectors that connect to those mechanical hard drives. They're right where this goes, so they kind of get in the way a little bit. And the hard drive cage for that solid state drive is right on top of this power supply. So any heat from that, I mean, you guys know heat rises. So that goes right straight into this drive. I mean, it could definitely affect it. I haven't had any issues so far. But I mean, if something were to happen and I was to try that eco mode and it gave off a little bit more heat than normal, that could definitely affect that performance of that drive. So that's again why I'm choosing to go ahead and use that fan on that power supply. Just try to keep those temperatures in check a little bit. Going in here now. I know a lot of times system builders will like to run their cables for their power supply first to see how that's all going to route. I've already used this case before, so I know a lot of ways that the cables are going to route through here. This has got several different parts here where you can get cables to come through, along with two up here and a large spot down here. It's got a lot of areas to route, so I like that. It keeps things nice and neat. That's one of my goals with this build, is to make sure that not only does it look good in this compartment that you're going to see, but in the back compartment here as well for airflow and dust collection. I want to make sure it stays neat so that if I need to pull it apart, I can, and I'm not going to have this huge mesh of wires that's just going to fall out at me. I'm not going to run these cables yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the main board and the processor and the M2 drives fitted first, get those put in place, and then I'm going to route those cables. That way I can make sure that I have everything in place and I can see exactly how long those cables need to be and what areas they'll need to route through. So let's get started on that, okay? Like I talked about in the other videos, this board supports 2 of these M2 drives. I picked up the 2280 lengths. That's what these ones were here. Price-wise, they were dirt cheap. So, I mean, I saw a good deal and I kind of jumped on it. It's not always the case. Sometimes these can be pretty expensive. So just be careful if you're going to do something like this. Watch for sales, watch for prices. There's certain places that you can pick these up cheaper than normal. Wish is a good place to look at. It's not always the best value, so be careful. There are a lot of counterfeits on there, so you need to watch what you're doing. But, alright, so we've got these 6 screws out. Let's see if I can get this. Now again, this does come with a plastic cover on here to keep it protected, to keep the main board from getting scratched up until you're ready to go. I'm not going to put those or take those off yet. I'm going to wait until I have this thing mostly assembled to pull those off, just to keep the fingerprints and stuff down. Also with the screws, it does have detents to keep them in place so they don't fall out. The only ones that do come out is ones that hold the fan cover on. Okay, so not that big a deal, but it's still something that's nice to have. This does have thermal tape on here, so we want to make sure that before we do anything, I'm going to go ahead and peel the protective tape off of this. And a lot of people say wait until you're ready to put it on. I don't like doing that because I'll forget. I want to make sure that I have everything as thermally sound as possible. That's why also choosing placement of these 2 drives. It took me a long time trying to figure out which drive I wanted where, just because of heat. My main factor is the drive that I'm going to be using the most is probably going to be that boot drive, the 500 gig. So that one's going to cause the most heat. Also, it's going to be if I mount it too close to that video card, it's going to pull that heat from that video card and cause issues as well. Now, looking at the way the video card is placed in here, that video card is going to be mounting right here. You have an M2 slot here and an M2 slot here. Normally I would say, okay, let's put that most used drive down here away from the video card. However, the way that these fans work on this video card, it's going to be blowing that air out and it's going to circulate back around and hit that bottom card. When I have that all-in-one water cooler mounted in the front, it's going to be blowing cool air across, and it's going to be hitting that M2 drive on top of the video card, which is also protected by the actual card itself away from those fans. It's also the closest to this fan that's on the North Bridge. So in my opinion, I think putting that most used drive on the top slot here is going to be the best option. It's going to be the coolest, and it's going to get the most airflow. So we're going to go ahead and mount that. Now, we're going to be testing this for fitment first. So the first thing we do, get in that slot till it clicks, and make sure, yep, it's matching up good. If it doesn't match up, remember that the main board came with those extra screws and detents, the standoffs, to be able to take and get this in the right spot here, so that way it's fitted correctly and it's going to sit the right way, which again is the most important part about this. So we've got this. And I missed. I will admit this is ideally not the best lighting situation here, but you work with what you got. This is what I got. So there we go. I made sure these are snug but not too overly tight, and then give it a good push. Make sure that that thermal pad seats really well on this. I want to make sure that's got good contact for cooling. Now I can tell you already by looking at this that this one is going to need one of those standoffs. You can see it right now. By the time I fit it, it needs a standoff right here. There we go, that's snug. Make sure we get this oriented correctly again. Screw started there. There we are. Okay. Make sure I don't feel any gaps or sagging in there. Sometimes you can get these to where they mount onto these heat sinks first. That's the only complaint I have on this main board, is there's no reference on there of where that M2 card needs to sit. So you're left kind of guessing. I mean, on the one, yeah, I could have guessed a little bit where the one screw hole was on the end, but I don't want to take a chance that I get it stuck on there really good. I go to put on and it's a millimeter off. That would just be kind of heartbreaking, because then I'm having to try to peel it off, and there goes that thermal tape. So we got that back on there. I'm going to go ahead and fit the fan shroud back on here now. And you see how much I've been touching these covers, and that's exactly why I left that plastic covering on these, is just to make sure, like I said, that they stay looking really nice. I want them to look really pretty as long as possible. once I get it assembled in here, like I said, I'll take them off. I just don't want to have fingerprints all over it before I've ever even fired the computer up. So now we've got the M2 drives in. That's one of our big steps there. I'm going to get this out of the way. Now next, I'm going to go ahead and fit that AMD Ryzen in here. I am not going to fit the cooler on here like I told you guys. I am not using the stock cooler. I'm going to be using that all-in-one water cooler that I already had from Corsair. It does a really good job. I really like how it cooled the processor I had in here already. So I'm going to reuse that. It doesn't have the RGB all over it like the Ryzen coolers do, but it does have the little Corsair logo that lights up that you can customize to your specific need or want. So I'm going to keep that one, and I really like it. And then after I get this fitted, I'll put the memory in. Once I have the whole mainboard in the computer itself, that's when I'll go ahead and I'll fit the water cooler back in there and get it all hooked back up on this processor. Now, if you guys remember when I was talking to you guys, I had said something about there being a little golden triangle on here. If you look at the corners of the CPU, you'll see that golden triangle. What that is, that's the mounting triangle. It's what tells you, okay, this is the proper orientation for me to go. If you look at the slot here, you should see right here a golden triangle, or a triangle shape as well, to kind of mark that, yes, this is the correct place where it's supposed to go. When you go to put this processor in, make sure the lever is up. It should fit into place and drop down nice and easy. You shouldn't have to force it, push it, or anything. It sat down nice and easy. As you can see, I can wiggle it back and forth. It's not sliding anywhere. Give it a decent pressure in the middle and lock that processor down. When you're done, it shouldn't move at all. It should be nice and steady. That's how you know that it's mounted correctly. If it's not mounted correctly, you've pushed it into place, you might have bent some of those pins, and you're done. That processor is going to be toast. It is so hard to try to unbend those pins without breaking them, and you can't solder those back on. You can't just stick them back on with some glue. They're 24 karat gold covered pins, and they're done. So do yourself a favor. Be careful the first time. Don't mess it up. You'll cost yourself a lot of money. Okay, I've got that mounted in here now. So next, we're going to do that memory. If you guys remember right, this was that GSkill Triton Royal memory that I was telling you guys about. Again, this stuff is really beautiful looking memory. It does have some cleaning cloths and case badges that it came with as well. What I'm going to do, when I showed this to you guys the other day, I told you how it has a protective coating on the memory as well. I'm going to go ahead and remove that plastic off here now as I'm fitting it in here. And the main reason I'm doing that is I want to make sure that when I get it in there, I'm not trying to peel it in between or peel it sideways and have it be really funky. I just think it'd be easier to get to while it's out and on my hand. But before we get this mounted, normally a lot of these times, these memory slots, they'll have these little levers on the sides that lock it in place. You'll push them over and they unclick, and then you push them in place and they click to lock it in. Most times it's on both sides. That's what I was checking on this. These ones are actually fixed on this one, so when you put it in, it'll go in a little bit and then click into place in the memory. The bottom of these memory are also keyed. On the DDR4, they're different than DDR3, different than DDR2, different than DDR1. That way you can't get the wrong memory module in. The best thing you can do is take one stick, and I can physically see that the key is more towards me, which if you look where this is at, it's more towards me now. I know it's going to go in this way, but again, just to test fitment, put one in before I go removing everything. Make sure it clicks into place, and we are good. Go ahead and release that lever, pull that memory out. I'm going to remove this now, put it back into place, and then I know all the rest of them should go with that sticker facing to my left. Space challenge, by the way, you figure out ways to make things work. So being that I'm a little space challenge here in my work area, I figured, you know, the air hockey table can kind of double as a desk. I do have an actual desk that I work at. However, it's kind of covered with all my other stuff that I'm working on right now, including homework from college. So, so we got that memory all in place there. If you look at this, once this is in the computer and facing out, you'll see those crystals really nicely. Once that's lit up, it's going to give a really nice glow to it. This has got AuraSync compatible here, and supposedly those are AuraSync compatible as well. I don't know exactly how that works. I have not messed with any of the RGB stuff on this yet, so it's something I'm going to play with as I get it going here. But we're going to have lighting here, there, and then down here that Asus logo. I do have some LED lights from my time as working at Radio Shack. I'm going to try to see if I can get them working with this to see if it's compatible. I don't know, so I can't promise anything, but if I can figure out a way to get those to work, that's something I'll add later. I'll kind of show you guys how that looks. So I'll just post it as an update if I can get it working. On this here, I already have the standoffs in here from my last main board, and I'm just taking a look to see everything's looking like they're the same exact standoffs. It's still an ATX board, so everything should be good. Normally underneath here there is another screw hole. You would leave this heatsink off until you get it mounted in here and then put the heatsink on. But I knew that this screw here was not actually a screw, it's just a support standoff. So all it does is it pokes through, but it doesn't have a screw that goes into it or anything. It's just there for support. So I knew I didn't have to worry about that. The other nice thing is the back plate on this is built into the main board now. It doesn't have a separate back plate to go into the back of the computer case. So I don't have to worry about trying to fit a back plate and then getting this to fit in and not sitting right or not matching up or bending or anything else. So it's really handy. I really like that about these newer boards. They've simplified things a lot. Now I am going to go ahead and remove the cover off of this back plate though. And the main reason is the way that's designed, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to that once it's in. At least not very easily. Alright. So that board sat in there really nice and easy. Head and get these standoff screws put in place here. We'll make sure that everything is tightened down. There's no short issues. That was the one thing I was doing, was this, counting the holes that I'm going to be using in this main board versus the holes or the amount of standoffs that I had. So that's one very important thing to make sure you pay attention to. You don't want to have too many standoffs, because if you do, what'll happen is you'll have one that's touching on the back somewhere that there's not a screw hole, and you'll cause a short. It could not cause any issues. It could cause boot issues, or it could cause permanent failure of a part there. I mean, you could have it too close to a power component and short out, blow out a power supply, cause a catastrophic failure, and fry the entire main board. Which, if you've ever done something like that, you'll know just how painful that is. To spend all the time building, all the effort, just to have it all go up in smoke. It's not very fun. Everything's nice and tight on that now. It's looking really good. I really like it. So we got that cable in place now. We ran into a little bit of a snafu. It was not wanting to go in place really well, and it started bending one of the pins. So I had to straighten that pin out a little bit. That's why I told you it's real easy to bend these pins. There's a dead spot marked out on that cable connector, and from the factory that pin must have been just a little bit off center, and when I went to put it in place, I started to get it pushed into place, and I felt it kind of bend over, and that was why I stopped what I was doing. I wanted to make sure enough, that pin had bent all the way over. So I got a pair of tweezers down in there, straightened it back up. It's in place now, we're good. So one issue down. Want to make sure I put everything back that I was using. Like I said, this is kind of one of my last remnants from the good old days of Radio Shack. They actually did a good job making this kit, so I'll give them that much. Alright, so next we have the HD audio. I'm going to locate the HD audio on here. This flashlight's definitely going to come in handy. It should be down here towards the bottom. Node USB. I believe that was the HD audio there. And the sheer amount of connectors this thing has is just absolutely insane. I love this though. I mean, it's really nice to actually have this much, so it's kind of handy. But yeah, that's going to be your audio port down there. So advanced audio port AAP. Okay, so it's down at the very bottom. I'm going to come through that bottom slot. So, but this just plugs in for the HD audio right down here. That's plugged into place now. As you can see, that cable will be nice and neat out of the way. It's going to run over here. And then again, I left enough here with a loop so that way it's going to loop around inside the back here. If you can see, that's got enough to loop around with this other cable, be held in place to keep it out of the way, keep it nice and neat looking. So we're going to leave that there for now. The only other front connector I need to worry about is, again, the front panel connector. So I'm going to grab that new adapter out of this motherboard box. So remember what I said about this connector being quite a bit smaller than the other one? This is the new connector versus the old one. As you can see, it's a lot smaller. They've done away with all those spaces that were in there. Everything's filled in nicely now, so it's all grouped together. They pulled the speaker off of it and put it separately now, since most of the speakers are separate anyways. And I don't know about you, but I haven't used a speaker in a case in years. They're handy if you need them for the beep codes, but I haven't had to hook up a speaker for anything in a long time. Especially now with this main board having that little digital readout on there to give you the error codes. I'm not as worried about beep codes anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to be hooking up a speaker in here, so I'm not too worried about it. But we're going to go ahead, pull these off of the old one, and we're going to get them fitted onto the new one here. So try to untangle these wires, because right now they're a hot mess. Actually, what I might do, I may see, there's 4 cables here. I'm going to try to see if I can't kind of get a braid going with these. Okay, so I went ahead and I ran that cable over. What I did was I went through, those were 4 separate cables and they were just all over the place. So I tried to take, and to make it look a little bit nicer, I went ahead and braided those cables together to give it a little bit cleaner of a look, and attached that series of cables to the case now. The reason I did that is that way I know that that whole bundle is the front panel connector cables. I've still got 4 more connector points here, plus I can still connect to this bundle as well, so it's not a big deal. Like I said, I wanted to make sure I at least got that part of it ran and tied off. Now my next step, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run these serial ATA cables that are connected into these hot swap hard drives. That way those are ran, and we're good to go on that. And then I'm going to go ahead and run the serial ATA cable up here to the CD drive, and then I'll start running these power cables. So I'm going to go ahead and get those ran here. Once I get those done, I'll go ahead and pick back up. So I went ahead and I got all the serial ATA cables ran. I didn't want to bore you guys with doing that. Those just all connect down here in the bottom right corner of this main board. That's right down here. I went ahead and ran them all through the same slot here, so that way they look nice and clean. As you can see, that front panel connector is running right there, and then that audio connector is over here. We still need to run the 24-pin power connector, the 8-pin and the 4-pin CPU power connectors. I believe this power supply that I bought, or that I got warranted, has both. So I should be good to go. If it doesn't require that 4-pin. It's just for extra overclocking. You get more consistent power on the main board. I'm not planning on doing any overclocking, but consistent power I'm never going to complain about. So if I can, I'm going to use both. I'm going to go ahead and hook up this all-in-one cooler now. I'm doing a front panel mount. The reason I'm doing a front panel mount is so I'm pulling cool, clean air in from the front. It doesn't really get that warm, but these are high static pressure fans, so they blow a lot of CFM. And the reason I'm doing that is it's going to help blow more cool air towards the components here. When I get this all together, I'll kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. But it helps to get a little bit more airflow in there. I'm running this with the 2 input fans on the front, and then a output fan, an exhaust fan on the back of the case, and 2 exhaust fans on the top of the case. This Corsair mainboard is really good about, or Corsair mainboard, Corsair case is really good about the amount of fans that are in here. So I'm not really going to complain about that. I did bend one of those radiator fins a little bit. I got a few bends in here, just from wear and tear over the years. You know, just moving stuff around, doing things with it. For the most part, most of these kind of superficial. There's none that are actually blocking off airflow. That's kind of what I went through here earlier, just to make sure. They're just showing a little bit of bends, but they don't affect the airflow at all. So I just wanted to make sure I fixed that one that I snafu'd there a little bit. So that one was my fault for sure. Kind of an odd angle here in this screwdriver I'm using. It's just a hair too small for these screws. It doesn't get the greatest grip in the world. So I apologize on me fighting with this here. Overall, it does a pretty good job. It's just if I run into anything that's the littlest of a tight screw in, it's kind of losing its hold on these screws. So I just want to make sure generally these are pretty tight, not over torqued or anything, because this is an aluminum radiator. I do not want to take the chance of stripping out those screws. but I want to make sure that I'm not going to have any vibration either. There's nothing worse than getting it all going. You turn it on, and you've got vibration coming from the fans or the radiator or a pump, anything like that. It's just plain annoying. Okay. I did make some changes in the orientation. I had this all-in-one between the last time I had it. Before I had the hoses coming off the top and then coming down into the processor, just to keep from any interference with that video card. I didn't have any issues before, but one thing I noticed was once I got this in here, the Corsair name was upside down. Now I'm going to be running it this time this way, so that Corsair name is right side up. Looks a little bit better, and this will still be out of the way, so I won't have to worry about anything hitting it there. These will be pushed out of the way from that video card, so I'm not going to have issues with it. But I'm going to go ahead and get some thermal paste applied. I did clean this off really good. I wanted to make sure I didn't have any thermal paste remnant left to have any issues with it. Where'd that bracket go? There it is. Nice thing about this all-in-one cooler is it came with this bracket for the standard AM4 or AM3 sockets, and it is forward compatible with the AM4, so I didn't have to worry about any new brackets, new mounts or anything like that. It's straight from the factory fit, so it's one thing I really like about it. It's the Corsair H110i GT. It's a 280 millimeter radiator kit. I am using Arctic Silver 5. This does a really good job of thermal dissipation and thermal contact, so I've always used this. I've used it for a long time. Rule of thumb on this, I usually put about a BB size, maybe a little bit bigger of a blob there. That's about all you need. Once you get this fitted and torqued down, that does squish it and it spreads it out some, so you don't have to worry about things. Go ahead and get this mounted on the underside there, on the top side there, and now got that in place. I'm just gonna screw these screws down as I go. That's going to make contact. That's going to ensure that I have a proper fit. I'm going to take this down until it's tight, but not so tight that it's creaking or cracking or anything. Now I want to make sure I give this a jiggle, that it doesn't move around on me, that it's got a good fitment. Feels pretty good there. Like I said, those hoses are out of the way. I'd like to have it to where it wasn't interfering with this memory, but the only way I could really do that is again to put these hoses on the top here, have it running down and around. But then I run into the issue of the name is upside down. It looks kind of really weird when you have the Corsair brand backwards, so in my opinion, that kind of just defeated the whole purpose, so I didn't want to do that again. Now these fans here will actually connect in to the controller here. So this controls the front fans. It's got the Corsair ICU, IceQ, however you say that. I'm not really sure, but I believe it's ICU. It does a really good job of controlling these. I like to keep it on either a balanced plan or even a custom fan curve. That way it's not as loud and it's not as annoying. There's nothing worse than doing a water cooling system and it's louder than a jet plane taking off. So now what I may do is After I get all this fitted and tested, I'll probably end up switching these fans so that they're facing the opposite direction here with these. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and run these wires over to here. We're going to plug them in, and then I'm going to push everything through over here. So that way, it keeps it looking nice and neat. There's no issues. Actually, I'm going to bring these, I'm going to push this through here and down. The reason I'm doing this is so I can push these through on this one. Just keep a little bit cleaner of a look. Again, I'm probably going to swap these just so that way I'm not going all the way across with these, although that does help to take up some of the excess slack on this, so it's less I have to tie off in the end. So it depends on how it looks. I may or may not keep that. I'm going to go ahead and connect these in really quick back here. I'm only going to take a second, so I'm not too worried about having you over here watching what I'm doing. And at the same time, you probably wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing anyways, because where this is at, it's kind of blocked by this DVD burner that I still have. I know DVD burners have kind of been phased out. They're not as popular anymore. Most of your newer computers aren't even coming with them. I still like to have one, just because every once in a while I do burn a CD now and then, or I might make a backup of something for somebody. And having that ability is just nice. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and have gotten rid of it. My Windows installation, by the way, I did download the tool creator for that and put it on a USB drive, so that way it'll go a lot faster installing than the CDs. So not too worried about that one. So we've got the majority of everything hooked up. If you notice, there's still another line hanging here. And what this is the power for the pump. It's everything's built into here, into the block. This is a serial ATA connector, so I'm going to feed this through up here, and then this is actually the all-in-one header pin here. I'm going to put that on this all-in-one connector there that this new mainboard has. It's kind of neat. I really like that feature. Again, it just keeps it out of the way. Keeps it nice looking, and it's very handy that it has those headers like that. Alright, so that's fed back there. Once I get those lines, those power cables connected to that the PSU, that'll take care of that, so I'm not too worried about it. So I do have a twist in here. I want this to be as flat a run as possible, so let's get this twist out. There we go. That keeps that nice and neat. Now on this pump controller, it still has one more cable, and that's this here. What this is it's a control cable that fits in the side of the pump over here. It's a USB mini, not a micro, but a mini. What this does is it connects to the side over here and connects to a USB port on the main board. And what that does is it allows you to control the software, or the actual pump and everything, through the USB. That's how everything communicates here. Remember those fans I was telling you about that it can control, and the speeds and everything else? So you can also balance the pump, change the color of the pump, the LED lighting on it, which is really handy. I'm going to run this up here. I'll probably try to run this up and through the memory here as well, and then over to the USB header, which is going to be down here at the bottom. So I'm going to have to drop it down in the back and bring it all the way around. My last mainboard actually had a USB header over here, which was quite handy. This one still does, but it's this USB 3.2 Gen 2 header. So it's the new style. I don't know if you can see that right down here. It's a newer type header versus the old header. As you can see, that one's more of a style where it's a socketed plug, whereas this one's a pin plug. So it's not going to work there. So like I said, I'm going to have to drop this one down, bring it up through the bottom, and connect it to one of these onboard USBs, which is okay. That's not that big of a deal. So let's get this routed. Again, I could probably route it around here, but I don't want to bring it by this heat pipe. This is going to be routing a lot of heat from these VRMs up here. I don't want to run a chance that I'm going to melt this cable or have any issues from heat from the cable. So I'm going to try to keep everything I can away from that area. So we've got that pushed up there. Again, I'm trying to keep these fan headers clear so that in the future, if I do need those, I can use them. I can tell you right now, the way that this is set up, I've got a fan header here that I'm going to use for the back fan. I've got, I believe, a fan header there. Yes, fan header there. And I'll probably have to use that CPU optional fan up here for these top two fans. There's no other fan port over here, so yeah, I can use that one there. I mean, I could bring it down. There's more fan connectors down here, but I don't want to do that long of a run. Like I said, I want to try to keep the wires in the other side of this as neat as possible also. So that's another thing I'm going to have to kind of figure out there. But let's get this ran first. There. Now this has got a dead pin there, so you'll see there's a block off. You'll see on these USB headers there's a missing pin as well. Make sure you get that matched up there. So when you plug it in, you don't have any issues, and it should plug in really nice and easy and slide in there. It doesn't matter which one you plug it into as long as it's plugged into one of those headers. That's the only important thing. So I've got that plugged in. Let's go ahead and run these top two fans really quick. Get these taken care of. So that way I can move on to trying to route these PSU cables. And let's try to get this build done and over with. Let's go ahead. I'm going to run this one. Top connector up here. You can see my lighting here is not the greatest, so I'm having to use a flashlight here a lot. I just want to make sure I'm getting that lined up correctly and I'm not running into any issues. I do not want to take and bend a fan header pin. What fan header was the middle one there? Okay. So we're going to run this other one down through this wire bundle that I already have in here and out through there. That way I'm end up right by that other fan header. And then all I got to do, plug it in, and that one's done. So that takes care of the bulk of those. Now all I have left is one fan to go on the back here, which I'll kind of wait to the very end to do, the video card, and the power cables. So let's go ahead and get these power cables ran. So first thing I'm going to run is that 24-pin cable. That tends to be the biggest one. Kind of a real pain in the tail to try to run in the first place. So we'll get this one done. Oh, floppy connector. This probably just go right straight in the box and never ever come back out again. I don't know too many people that actually still use that power cable connector so for the floppies anymore. I mean, they're just so obsolete that they're almost ridiculous to even include anymore. So I really don't understand why a lot of these manufacturers still include those. I haven't seen a floppy drive in pretty much anybody's computer in ages. So I don't know. I mean, it is what it is, but we won't go there. We'll just leave it. So I'm going to go ahead and feed this power connector through. Now this tends, in my opinion, to be one of the most difficult ones to run, just because of how thick this cable actually is. It is really heavy duty. It's stiff. It does not like to lay down. It doesn't like to bend. Yeah, as normal, it's extremely tough to bend this thing. Now let's get this in here. A lot of people will run this one first. There we go. Wanted to make sure I heard that click. There's no space. No space. A lot of people run it just so that they don't bend their board. They don't like to tweak it. I don't like to run it first. I find it's kind of a pain because then it's constantly in your way for the entire build. I don't like that. I like to try to leave the hard things for after I've already ran all the easy stuff. In my opinion, it just makes it a lot easier to try to handle some of these things. Now I am going ahead and plugging this all into the power supply back here. And again, I'm making sure to put those little loops in so that way it gives me a little bit of place to keep some of these cables, cable management wise, looking nice. Like I said, I want to keep this as clean looking as I can, at the same time functional. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but my husky upstairs is going nuts because she's mad that we had to put her in a kennel. Unfortunately, her and my male were constantly coming down here fighting with each other the whole time I was trying to do this video. So they're just generally making a ton of noise, and yeah, we're just being annoying. So unfortunately, it is what it is, and they had to get put up. But I'm almost done here, so we're getting really close here. Let's say I probably have maybe 10 minutes left, you guys, and I should be about finished up. So we have that one ran. Now I'm going to run these CPU power connectors. I said that should be this one right here. So this is going to be some of the Molex connectors. I don't have anything in here that takes a Molex connector. I'm going to put that to the side. This is that CPU connector, which, like I told you, the really nice thing is this does have 8-pin and the 4 pins. I won't necessarily need all of them, so not that big a deal, but I want to make sure I get the right orientation. of how these are designed to fit. Okay, so that is correct. All right, I went ahead and I got that 8-pin power and that 4-pin CPU power ran up here. As you can see, tried to keep everything as neat as possible. Everything's plugged in. Wanted to try to get as maximum power as I could up here, going to the main board for stability reasons, again for future overclocking as well. I went ahead and pulled the plastic off of all those pieces, made sure those were good to go, because now I'm getting into the last couple parts here. Go ahead and get this exhaust fan hooked back up here. So we'll get this done. Now, again, make sure to check your orientation on your fans. You want to make sure you have everything spinning correctly. This fan spins this way, catches the air and it forces it out through the back right there. So we want to make sure we get this mounted that way. If you have it mounted the opposite way, what's going to happen is when this spins up, it's going to blow air back in, and I don't want 3 inlets and 2 outlets. I want the 2 high static pressure fans to blow in, with the 3 regular fans blowing out to keep a little bit of positive case pressure. It helps keep a little bit more of the dust out. Now normally, depending on how your airflow is, negative case pressure is really good for cooling, but it allows a lot more dust in. This kind of probably actually, airflow wise, would probably even out pretty close. I don't really have any way to measure that right now, so I don't know for sure. What I need to do is make sure I check for the best fitment for this fan. Get this chassis fan hooked up here. Again, I want to keep it away from running it up here to this heat pipe. So I'm looking at keeping it down here. I'm probably going to undo this zip tie and try to lay this cable up there to where it's on the underside of this fan, or even maybe inside the behind here. I'll probably do that. I did leave this twist tie on here just because, I mean, it came with the fan to begin with, and it just made life easier at first. Wrapped up in here. This thing's just now wanting to cooperate. About right there should be good. So I want to make sure I have enough to get up there and still have this tucked away between this fan frame and this area here. Keep it as neat looking as possible. So my goal in this is to have functionality along with aesthetics. I want to keep this as pretty, I guess you'd say, as possible. I would call that pretty successful there. Let's go ahead and get these screws mounted in here. Now again, I'm using all 140 millimeter fans in this case. I like the high airflow of these, plus the fact that you can keep the RPMs a lot lower than you can with 120 millimeter fans, and yet still get a good CFM rating with these. These are all Corsair fans. These were all ones that I matched with the case a while back. These are another one of the components that I did reuse, just because money. that's a kind of important thing there. So the more that I could save doing this, the better. Some of the components, like I said, were dirt cheap. Some of them were free. All of them were wonderful and thankfully needed. So, like I said, with the components that I took out of here, that's going to be used to redo my other computer that my daughter uses. That way she gets an upgrade as well. And then I have spare parts left over as a what if just in case type deal. So let's see, that's pretty well hidden, looks pretty good. Last component we need to do is going to be this EVGA Geforce RTX 2080, kind of the second crown jewel of this whole thing. That AMD 3900X processor was definitely a major deal for me. This is going to be a really nice upgrade that I wasn't really expecting. So this is going to be kind of fun, we'll put it that way. And get that seated in there. Make sure that's in there good. Okay, that's seated well. I went ahead and already pre-ran these cables for the PCI Express here. One thing you'll notice is a lot of your higher end video cards have dual power connectors. Some of them are dual 6-pin, some are a 6 and an 8-pin like that, and some are dual 8-pin. Just depends on how much power that card actually uses. I will say I have not had one that was dual 8-pin yet, but the reason I kind of say yet is some of the higher end video cards, especially when you get into the super overclocks or the, whatever they want to call them now, your titanium models, stuff like that, the Kingpin series, the Fatalities, all your big branded cards, a lot of those need that extra power for that overclock that they've got, that they guarantee straight from the factory. So they make them two 8-pin PCI Express connectors. Now as you can see here, these are thumb screws, and I'm still tightening these down with a screwdriver, just because the angle that they're at, they're really hard to get fat fingers in, and I don't have the skinniest fingers in the world. So that is nicely secured now. It is a 2.5 slot video card, so it does use 3 of those thumb screws, which really holds that in place really good. Again, that's got that reinforced connector in there that I talked about when I went over the main board on here, so that helps to hold that weight of that video card. I mean, this thing is pretty heavy. It's honking huge. Now some people might wonder about the restriction in airflow from this fan because of these tubes being here. Really, with the high static pressure from these fans, I have not noticed any airflow issues whatsoever. Plus with the extra flow coming across this video card, it helps a lot. And then remember what I talked about, that M2 drive that I had mounted right here. As you can see, use the screwdriver here. As you can see, the M2 drive is right there. It's above the plane for the video card. So this is going to help protect that from the heat. You're going to also have cool air blowing across here, which will cool that, and from this fan as well blowing across. The only concern I have is that where they placed the fan for that chipset is right underneath the video card. So this is going to be exhausting hot air straight into that fan. I don't know how that's going to affect performance. I have not seen any negatives from any of the other reviewers or anything yet, so I am anticipating that it's not going to affect it. If it does, hopefully it's very minor. I'm going to go ahead and get these PCI Express connectors plugged in here, and this is the last step of my install. So after this, the build is complete. Now you can see the way that this power supply is designed is it has those 6+2 connectors to give you 8-pin connectors. It's not needed on here, so technically I could really clip that off if I wanted to. I just don't like having bare connectors there. But we're going to go with this. I'll probably take and try to zip tie that down here, just to keep those out of the way. I don't like how those are sitting up as much as they are. Like I said, I want to try to keep this build as clean looking as possible, for airflow reasons, for aesthetics, and just general. I want to make sure it looks good. Now once I pull this tight inside there, that will take care of the last of the cabling. And then all I got to do is put the front air filter on, the 2 panels, the side panels, and get it hooked up and Windows installed. So I'll let you guys go with this. It's been a pleasure. Once I get this installed here and I get it up and running again, I'll do another video to show you how the performance is compared to my old system. All right, thank you guys.